Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Berkey. I'm the Communications and Research Director at the Minnesota Housing Partnership. And it is our pleasure today to present Market Watch Hennepin County, Trends in the Unsubsidized Multifamily Rental Market. This research report, I'll back up. Minnesota Housing Partnership was founded in 1989. We convene, guide, and support a diversity of partners working to improve conditions of home and community. Our organization has three primary areas of focus. Research, which is where this report was developed, and we use that research to make the case for investing in home and community. Our policy department advances solutions and funding for affordable housing, and our community development work works directly with communities to achieve local housing and development goals. This Market Watch report came out of kind of a crisis in affordable housing that occurred in 2014. It focuses on unsubsidized multifamily rental homes, and as the Crossroads building in Richfield was converted, 698 apartments of affordable housing were lost, and our idea was to try to quantify what that means for the community when that level of affordable housing is lost. So what came out of that was our Market Watch report. To date, we've done Market Watch Dakota County, Market Watch St. Paul, and Market Watch Minneapolis. And next up, I have Gabriella Norton, who is our research officer at the Minnesota Housing Partnership. She does the data, the writing, a lot of the visualization, just really gets these reports in the shape so that we can get them out into the community. So thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. You will see this first slide is looking at the rent, which is rising disproportionately fast to median renter incomes. Although median renter incomes have bounced back from recession, they are still not keeping pace with the increase in rent. And I will note that everything in this presentation is adjusted for inflation, so keep that in mind. And this is becoming a larger and larger issue because of the growing number of renters across the county. So currently in Hennepin County, 38% of households are renters, so that equals 587 renters. Not only do we have a large, significant population of renters, but we've also seen a 22% increase in the number of renter households since 2000. Households of color are disproportionately impacted and are facing the steepest burdens. This is because while only 24% of white households are renters, 60% of households of color in Minnesota are renters. Not only that, but the median income by race is very inequitable. Currently, Black, Native, and Hispanic households earn about half that of white and Asian households, as you can see in the graphic. And earnings for Black, Native, and Hispanic households have also declined, while white and Asian households have increased. So you can see Black household earnings have declined by 26% since 2000, Hispanic households have declined by 15%, and Native households have declined by 5%. And again, all of this is adjusted for inflation.
And so one of the things we're seeing in Hennepin County, not only Hennepin County, but the region and the state, is that the most in-demand jobs don't pay enough for workers to afford renting or owning. So when we look at Hennepin County, you can see here, when we look at some of the most in-demand jobs and the jobs that are growing the most, home health aides, personal care aides, food prep, retail sales, none of those jobs make enough to afford a standard two-bedroom apartment in Hennepin County. The only jobs we see that even come close, we look at software developers, registered nurses, are the only two that can afford a median value home, and then heavy truck drivers are getting up there just barely into what you need to afford a two-bedroom apartment. And this is important because what we're seeing in Hennepin County is that over half of our renters earn less than 60% of the area median income. So they are cost burdened. They are spending way too much on rent. They're sacrificing for other needs in the household. But what's even more stark in this picture is that of those 52% that are experiencing cost burden, 78% pay more than 30%, and 44%, almost half of those, are paying more than half of their monthly income on housing. So we can surmise that 44% of families are sacrificing things like food, medicine, education, transportation, just to pay the rent.
Average rent currently exceeds what modest income families can afford, and by modest we mean those earning under 60% of area median income. So this chart you can see across Hennepin County and by unit size. The light blue bars indicate what the average rent was in 2010. The darker blue bars indicate average rent in June of 2019. And you can see kind of the increase across all unit sizes. So overall, there's a 20% increase in rent. And the kind of brown bars show what would be affordable to those earning at 60% of area median income. Additionally, in this graphic, you can see what the average rent is for properties that have been constructed since 2010, and that is $1,788. That's the overall average rent for new construction in Hennepin County. So this chart looks at average rent, breaking it out by municipalities. So we looked at the change in rent from 2010 to 2018. The graphic is ranked by the cities that have the highest rent currently. So starting off with the Edina, Maple Grove, Golden Valley. The color of the bars show how many units are in that municipality in our study, and you can see kind of how things have changed over time. So Excelsior stands out, has the most significant increase in rent over this time period that we studied. Golden Valley also had a very substantial increase in rent, as did Maple Grove, and so on and so forth. So we took a deeper dive into what are the drivers of disproportionate rent increases. Reflecting back on the former slide, we wanted to know kind of why some cities were seeing such spikes in rent. So we took 3 case studies to look at, including the city of Excelsior, the city of Golden Valley, and the city of Bloomington. So in our analysis, we were looking for either a trigger event that happened over that 8-year period time span. So those trigger events would include a new construction, property renovation, or a property sale that would potentially spike rent, compared to also looking at just whether the city is seeing a general heating up due to increased demand. So from that analysis, we concluded that the primary driver behind Excelsior's rent increase was triggered by new construction. That city has the highest vacancy rate in our study, and had a few properties that came online that were new construction in this time period. Those properties contained rents that had that were on average 208% larger than all of the other average rents for properties built before 2010. So the average rent in 2010 in Excelsior is $961 compared to the new construction, which is close to $3,000 for average rent. Then we looked at Golden Valley and concluded that one of the strong drivers of rent increases were property sales. So we saw 55% of properties that saw the largest increases, saw about 10% increase in rent, had undergone a property sale during that time period. The city didn't see any significant renovations take place and very little new construction. And then moving on to Bloomington. Bloomington has seen significant rent increases across a number of properties that didn't see any trigger events, indicating a general heating up of the market. So in our study, 69% of properties that saw rent increases experienced no trigger events in our analysis that would indicate a spike in rent. And also, something of note contributing to the high demand in Bloomington is that the city currently contains the highest amount of NOAA units in our analysis and a very low vacancy rate, creating a very competitive market. That being said, there is a critical need for preservation. As we all know anecdotally to be true, many Class C properties are kind of easily upscaled to Class B, also seeing rent hikes. The current breakdown right now in Hennepin County is that 55% of units are Class C and 84% of buildings are Class C. As you can see also by the breakdown of building size by Class C properties are typically much smaller than those of Class B or Class A across the county. And vacancy rates are showing a demand for affordable units. So the breakdown by class shows that obviously Class C properties have the lowest vacancy rates at just 3.4%, and then you go up to Class A properties that have a much higher rate at 8%. And so here in this visual, we have a breakdown of the vacancy rate change by municipality. So going left to right, you'll see there are 3 cities that saw increases in vacancy rates, Excelsior, Edina, and Brooklyn Park, while all of the other municipalities in our study saw declines. Robbinsdale and Brooklyn Center and Spring Park and Hopkins seeing some serious major declines in the past since 2010 and into the first quarter of 2019. There's also a clear market for incentive for upscaling. This chart shows a breakdown between the different average rents by class and by unit size. So as you can see, overall average rent for a Class C is $10.58 in Hennepin County. Were a property owner to do some renovations, they could potentially move their building up to Class B, which is could be a 33% increase in average rent overall. But there's still time to preserve affordable units. So this map shows our NOAA analysis. So these are properties that contain a unit that is renting under 60% of AMI. So this is scaled to the unit size. So we're looking individually at 60% of AMI by studio, by 1 bedroom, et cetera. The overlay on this map is median renter income. So you can see as you're moving away from Minneapolis and out past the first ring suburbs, the median renter income goes up. There's a large clustering of these NOAA properties in Minneapolis as well as in the first ring suburbs. Property sales are continuing to rise. So back when we released Sold Out in, was it 2015? We were aware of this crisis. Since then, the matter has become even more dire. We've seen almost a double in property sales across Hennepin County, with 225 properties selling in 2018, and 10,534 units changing hands in 2018, so quite a significant amount. Property sales are also taking place in a lot of cities that have high renter households of color, and this is significant because of kind of the breakdown that we did at the beginning of the presentation. Renter households of color are more likely to have fewer options in terms of that there are more percentages of renter households of color that are renters, So as you can see, the property sales have kind of clustered across Minneapolis and the first ring suburbs, which kind of mirrors the NOAA map that I showed on a former slide. New units of affordability are not filling the gap. So here we have production from 2010 to 2017 for subsidized units and for unsubsidized units. So only 136 units were produced at 30% of AMI over this 7-year period in Hennepin County, a total of 4,709 subsidized units compared to 320 unsubsidized units. And the average rent was $19.28 in 2017 for those new market rate units coming online in the county.
So the top takeaways from our report is that it includes sobering trends for Hennepin County's rental market. Vacancy rates are at their lowest in 10 years. Wages are flat for renters, and new construction is largely limited to high-end multifamily properties. These factors, combined with an increase in total renters in Hennepin County, have resulted in dramatic increases in average rent across the county. This means that renters experience more financial pressure than ever before, with little to no options for rental opportunities when they need to find a new home. And as we've seen from the property sales and upscaling, many renters are having to find a new home. So what's next for MHP and our research? We're currently looking at expanding our research out of the metro and looking into greater Minnesota. With our first try, will be in Duluth. Also exploring some research around transit corridors and how those impact NOAA properties. And of course, we always want your ideas. If you are seeing trends in the community that you think would make a great thing to explore deeper or need some information, we are here. And along those lines, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the webinar, if you have any questions at all about this, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of this presentation. There is a Q&A function within the webinar. Feel free to send us your questions, and we will have a Q&A at the end with Gabriella and our next guest presenter, Dr. Eric Johnson. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Eric Johnson. He is a Community Development Director for the City of Bloomington. Prior to that, he was the Chief Development Officer for Charlotte, North Carolina, and has held real estate director and management positions for the Cleveland Port Authority and in Ohio and the City of Charlotte, North Carolina. He has also worked as the Director of Housing and Urban Development in Pompano Beach, Florida, and he helped us with our report. He was one of our subject matter experts, gave us some great feedback on how to improve our research. Dr. Johnson, it's great to have you here.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, so let's go to the first slide. Let's talk a little bit about Bloomington's Opportunity Housing Ordinance. We really will sort of get at how we've been approaching addressing the issues of affordable housing in Bloomington. Next slide. So the Opportunity Housing Ordinance went into effect September 1, and the overall strategy for the council is to integrate markets and affordable units in the same development. Because what we know is that the history of the region is such that the focus on affordability has been basically in standalone affordable housing developments over the last 10, 12 years versus working to include those units as part of the market-rate development. Next slide. So a quick overview of the ordinance really talks about, again, adopted. The ordinance was actually adopted in February. We had a transition period of about 6 months, leading to September 1 as the start date of the ordinance. The main focus is really to incentivize the creation of affordable units while basically furthering private market development. So our ordinance is not one that is designed based upon if you get zoning changes or if you get support from the city. It is a mandatory number. The key findings from the research, basically looking at the economy, looking at the jobs, looking at the greatest needs, in particular in Bloomington and sort of our sort of suburban area. We really landed on 60% of area median income and below. So by conducting what's called a nexus study, it really gets at the spending patterns of market rate development occupants to really create support for housing at a certain level. And in Bloomington, that number is at 9% of all new multifamily developments should at a minimum have affordable units at 60% and below. You can do more, but the minimum is 9%. Substantial flexibility and incentives basically offered to help offset the cost. So it's really tools and incentives designed to offset the cost before any sort of cash support, support provided, let's say, for example, here. So the idea would be through the ordinance. The ordinance is tested via development projects to see to what extent the ordinance can basically chop away at the cost of including the unit. Okay, so let me just talk about the ordinance overview. It's a citywide with transit focused area. New or major rehab projects of 20 or more. And it's important to note that the 20 or more unit application for ordinance is arrived at by doing substantial analysis and making sure that we don't impact the smaller developers in terms of being able to do development. Minimum requirements, I talked about that. The 9% or 60% below. Square footage threshold, 110%. I'm sorry, not square footage, the single family threshold for sale product is 110%. We have every flexible option known to man in this ordinance, on-site, off-site, in lieu of, NOAA preservation. We have provisions in the ordinance that will allow for developers to suggest ideas that we have not thought about, so we can adjust the ordinance basically on the fly. The tools are basically designed to support unit production and create viable projects. So, for example, in a 100-unit development in a designated transit area, the Bloomington would require about 200 parking spaces. Depending on your level of affordability, you can get a 40% parking reduction of $35,000 per stall, would equal something in the range of about $2.4 million in terms of the cost savings on the project. Again, we have a phase-in period, and we are working around the clock around the creation of a new affordable housing trust fund, which will be designed in a two-bucket approach. One, revolving loan, but a specific portion of our fund will be dedicated to 30% of AMI units to be included in our project. And we'll have an annual evaluation with the ability to adjust ordinance based on market changes. So we may be at 9% right now, but if things start to slow down, we can adjust our ordinance based on some defined economic metrics. Next question. I'm sorry, next slide. So what is this actually doing in Bloomington? So the ordinance was passed in February, went into effect September 1, and we currently have about 9 projects in the pipeline as of September 1, roughly about 1,500 units, of which 35% are coming in at affordable, and that affordable right now is at 60 and 50%. And it would be an understatement to say that our development pipeline is growing by the week. The number of calls coming in from developers, they're reading the ordinance, they're understanding the flexibility, and we're seeing basically no resistance to working towards including affordability into existing multi-rate projects. So the thing about Bloomington is the council is sort of really dedicated to reaching the net council's number. That's about 845 units by 2030. We will blow past 845 units probably in the next 24 months, but our challenge will be at the 30% AMI, which is about 445 units. So our main goal is to try and reach those numbers by 2030. If our pipeline can hold and we can figure out ways to create our trust fund that will focus squarely on the 30% AMI number. We believe that because you're required to add the unit at 60%, we're working on a way to offset the rent difference between the 30 and the 60 to be able to include some 30 as part of our pipeline project. Next slide. So here's our challenges. So when we started out with the ordinance, um, we named the ordinance Opportunity Ordinance, and we're really trying to reframe this from a social issue to an economic issue. So we really try to speak about it that way because we believe we can get through the support. Again, trying to find ways to include um, the greatest need housing, which is 30% AMI. And our city council really understands that after doing the research, because this whole process started out not only with significant research, we had economists, we had market rate analysts, we talked to every major developer in the region, affordable housing developers, advocates, every single city department, Chamber of Commerce weighed in on this ordinance. So we all know that the greatest need is really at the 30. And also trying to figure out ways to include seniors as part of this regular market rate development versus having standalone blocks, seniors sitting in isolation. And what we see is our biggest objective is really creating a trust fund, and we're making some great inroads to launching a trust fund. And in that context, working to preserve naturally occurring affordable units in town, and making sure we have the capacity to deliver on this emerging demand. I think you have to be careful with the ask for because we created an ordinance that is super flexible, um, built with developers, built with affordable housing advocates. And I think that the idea of having the capacity to deliver on this demand is probably one of our greatest challenges right now. And I think there's one more slide. Yep, I think that's it. So let's take questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. We've got contact information for everyone up here on the screen, so if you need to reach out about any of the stuff we've talked about today, this is a great group of folks. We will also be putting this webinar on our website on demand so that people can view it whenever they want, share it with others, and we also have a series of other webinars for our local housing trust fund work, which Dr. Johnson talked a little bit about just now, on our website as well. So, and then we are all set for a Q&A. We have a couple of questions that came in. First one for Gabriella. So Gabriella, what are so these trends in Hennepin County are not good for renters, but are we seeing similar trends in other areas of the Twin Cities metro?
That's a great question. I would say, we are kind of seeing similar trends across, so where we've done our analysis so far includes the core cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I would say that we are seeing these disproportionate impacts on renters across the state, but they seem to be a little bit more concentrated in the metro area. And also NOAA properties look different in different parts of the metro. So we did some NOAA analysis on kind of what the characteristics are of NOAA properties in Minneapolis and St. Paul. They tend to be much smaller buildings that were built in the 1920s, whereas as you get out and out into the outer ring suburbs, there are those NOAA properties like we'll recognize in Crossroads. So buildings that were built in the 1960s that have, 100 plus units. So that is something to keep in mind, just that the landscape looks different in different parts of the metro area. But I would say the challenges faced by renters are, pretty similar.
Thank you for that. Another question, I think this one is probably best for you, Dr. Johnson. Do communities have plans in place to assist displaced renters when a large building is sold, if a lot of renters are find themselves being forced out by upscaling or building sales?
I could tell you in Bloomington, I would say back in 2018, our council is committed to, and this is a bold statement, our council, if that happens, so we passed a 90-day tenant protection ordinance, but if that ordinance is violated, the council really talked about being able to provide that relocation support directly to the tenants and then sort of deal with the owners after the fact. So there's a commitment here to really sort of, move down that road. But I think part of our challenge is we're really monitoring the NOAA space, and what we're really learning is that our changes in the NOAA space is not so much about the acquisition; it's about the rent acceleration. We just conducted some research to really determine, what's driving some of the triggering events. And what we're finding in Bloomington is the sheer rent escalation that's causing the loss in Bloomington. So we are prepared to take some actions if the property came on the market for sale, and how the city, with its resources through the Port Authority and the HRA, can help preservation.
Oh, thank you. One more question. This one is geared for Gabriella. What sources of data do you use to put these MarketWatch reports together?
That's a really good question. So I would say our primary data source for the MarketWatch reports, we rely heavily on the CoStar database. So that is a database that tracks 4+ multifamily rental units across the state. You can kind of go into each property and look at a number of different characteristics like rent, vacancy, who owns the building, who were the previous owners, how things have changed over time. So it's a really great resource. That database aims to update information in real time, so that's how we're able to get the more recent snapshots of housing across the state right now. So we use that database quite a bit. That's how we're also able to get the rent data for identifying these NOAA properties using our criteria, and also get a pretty good snapshot on property sales, who is purchasing these properties, what are their characteristics, et cetera. We also use, American Fact Finder and IPM's microdata to get at more of the nuances of the, renter dynamics. So we use those databases to get our cost burden estimates, to get at kind of the racial differences in income earnings and cost burden as well. Let's see. I think those are like our primary data sources. We also use the Met Council data on production for affordable housing estimates as well. And then all of our occupational data comes from the Occupations and Demand website through Minnesota Deed. They actually just recently updated their list of top in-demand jobs and projected growth. So that is kind of brand new data for 2019 and for projections through 2029. So that's kind of exciting.
Great. Well, it looks like we don't have any further questions, so I think we'll close the webinar just a bit early today. I want to thank Dr. Johnson for being with us, Gabriella for just generally doing this work and creating these reports. And if folks have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to any of us on the webinar today. Like I said before, we'll be posting this to mhponline.org. So people can view it on demand, and we thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.